I think everyone is really interested to understand what happened to Silicon Valley Bank. It is truly a really shocking news, right, to a lot of people. And how did it happen? And I've been reading a lot of different articles and watching a lot of different videos, and I was trying to find a way to kind of summarize the timeline. And I found this from a website that I thought, oh, I can use this. I thought this is a pretty good way to kind of explain to people how it all happened. So let's start off with like 2021 during the funding boom, because of all these like federal incentives and all that. During COVID, there was like huge deposits that went into Silicon Valley Bank, and it was $189 billion in 2021 and peaked at $198 billion. And then, so what happens if they have so much deposit, right? So Silicon Valley Bank decided that they're gonna invest heavily in the bonds, and they were issued in a very low interest rate environment at the time. And so Silicon Valley Bank, their balance sheet for 2022 and show actually $91.3 billion of securities with mostly bonds. And then in 2022, US Federal Reserve started to raise interest rate, which what happens to the bond? You drive down the value of the bond, right? Because the bond, they were in a very low interest rate. So unfortunately, because they mostly held it in bonds, I would think that at first they thought, well, bonds is very safe, but at the same time, because the interest rate went up so quickly, it actually drove their value down. And what happened is that these venture capital firms cutting fewer and small checks to startup, and then they also have a funding, they call it funding winter, meaning that they have a lot less deposits into the bank. And because the funding depleted, the deposit made by startup institutions such as Silicon Valley Bank also started declining. Then they forced the bank to sell the securities, that the bonds that they bought, at a loss just to cover up the deposits. And that's what happened on Wednesday. Silicon Valley Bank announced that it had sold $21 billion worth of bond asset at a loss of $1.8 billion. And what happened once this news came out? They said that they need to raise $2.25 billion via share sell. So that created this panic, right? Because like all of a sudden everybody was talking about it, and even Peter Thiel telling his investors to start withdrawing deposits. But then at the same time, Silicon Valley Bank was trying to urge the customers to not spread panic and withdraw money from the bank. This is all happened because of social media. Social media was hashtag bank runs, Twitters and Reddits, a lot of these private groups, Slack, and they all started to fuel with all these topics about like, you better withdraw all the money. You know, instead of they talk about like how quickly it happened. They don't even walk over to the branch. They quickly pulled up a web page and logged in. It just take a few tries, eventually moved every cent to an account at a different bank within half an hour. That was how fast it was for people to withdraw money. And now let's compare what happened with Silicon Valley Bank compared to the largest bank collapse back in 2009, and for Washington Mutual. I used to bank with Washington Mutual. Now, Silicon Valley Bank, they had an asset of $209 billion. Washington Mutual was $307 billion in assets. The bank run for Silicon Valley Bank took 1 day. The bank run for Washington Mutual took 9 days. Within 1 day, they took $42 billion withdrawal. Washington Mutual, 9 days, $16 billion over 9 days. And that for Silicon Valley Bank, that $42 billion equivalent to 25% of their deposits. And Washington Mutual, that was about 9% of their deposits. That was how quickly social media was able to fuel this bank run that happened within 1 day, and it withdrew $42 billion worth of deposits. And also, you know, they only have over 30 or 35,000 depositors at Silicon Valley Bank, because most of them are venture capital startups, and so they have millions and millions of dollars in there. So it is really astounding to see the numbers, how quickly within 1 day they had a $42 billion withdrawal, and eventually the next day the government seized the bank. So that's how fast it came down. I want to remind everybody to go to our YouTube channel and subscribe so that you can get notification right away as soon as we post these new videos out. So Silicon Valley Bank came down, Signature Bank collapsed, and Credit Suisse now was bought out. I think it was just yesterday. Next one that people are panicking about is First Republic. And just letting everybody know, I bank with First Republic. So I was obviously very, very nervous and also worried about it. They sent out email right away and talk about, how stable they are. They have capitals in the bank and they're very well diversified. Hey, as a customer, you will still get really worried. And I also wonder if I should panic and just pull everything outright. First Republic, the stock went down 90%, but then it actually came back up today. I think it went up as much as 60%. A couple days ago, all these banks actually got together and deposited $30 billion into First Republic Bank just to show the public that they want to make sure that First Republic is not going to fail. Because of that, we received another email from the CEO and the president and the founder regarding this effort and comforting their depositors not to panic and not to pull a lot of money out. So my question is, for you, maybe Brad, I don't know, should I pull my money out or not?
Depends on how much we're talking about. I'm just kidding. It's I think we were chatting about this a little bit earlier. How many more banks are going to fall? And I'm taking it. My speculative play on this is just, since everyone on TV is saying that there's going to be a ton of other small banks crashing and they all seem to be in unison, I'm going to go on the other side of the spectrum and say, I don't think we're going to see a wave of a ton of regional banks collapsing simply based on how everyone on TV is in unison. It's not foolproof, but I think it's worked out well over the past, I think, 5 to 10 years on market calls. And there's Jim Cramer's a perfect example. I think there's an ETF that bets against his market calls, and I think as right after the turn of the year, he was saying buy on SVB. So it's I guess his analysts didn't review their financials either. So it's a tough decision to make.
It is indeed. I don't want to be one of those people who panic, but at the same time, I am panicking. And so I'm curious about other people, what they think. If you have any comments from me too, I would love to hear what you think.
You can't go wrong to share the wealth and spread it across a few, I would say, versus having all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And that's a very good reminder for people, is that sometimes you do have to spread it across, because this is a very good reminder, is that it's $250,000 insured per depositor per bank. So maybe you can clarify too. So that means if I have a savings account and I have checking account and I have another CD account at all under my name, it's really all combined $250,000. It's not per account that you're insured.
I believe so, but who knows these days? I think Janet Yellen's gone all in, saying that they're backing all deposits. So it's a similar stance that the Fed and government took during COVID's peak, basically going all in. They were buying junk bonds, they were buying mortgages, they were buying everything to keep the market up. So it's really how much bandwidth do they have, and that's another big kind of unknown. But just trying to give confidence back in the market, I think, is what they're doing altogether.
Absolutely. So I do hope that everybody is going to stay safe. I have friends who have deposits at Silicon Valley Bank. I have friends who work there. I was so worried about them, and but I'm just glad that, in a sense, is it right or wrong? That's a different story, whether the government should bail these banks out. I'm not going to get into it, but I'm just glad that at least they are doing okay. My friends are doing okay.